Have you ever visited Japan? Chances are, not since the pandemic. In the last decade, more and more people from Europe and the US decided to spend a vacation in Japan, lured by the chance of exploring the country they know from movies, anime, and manga. The number of international visitors to Japan increased fourfold from 2009 to 2019, a growth rate rarely observed in major industrialized countries. With the pandemic beginning in 2020, however, the tourist numbers would plummet in accordance with the global decline. The Japanese government made an unprecedented decision to completely close off the country to tourists in May 2020. Even though most countries have by now reopened to foreign tourists, the Japanese government has not budged, and as of the time of this video, only a partial reopening for less than 20,000 tourists as part of guided tours was passed. It is unclear when the government will fully reopen the country to tourists as long as COVID remains a threat. This strict policy has led to the downfall of Japan's tourism industry that has finally managed to establish itself after considerable government investments just a few years ago. How can the Japanese government so willingly destroy one of their key industries? What is the reason behind such a strict ban on tourism? After the Fukushima disaster in 2011, inbound tourism in Japan was at an all-time low. People were concerned about the possibility of radiation leaks even after the government declared the situation under control. Many countries' foreign ministers advised against traveling to Japan, and international trust in the Japanese government's transparency on the issue was basically non-existent. During this desperate situation, the Japanese voters turned to Shinzo Abe and elected him as Prime Minister in 2012. Abe's economic platform, called Abenomics, made tourism into a cornerstone, and ambitious policies soon led to not only a recovery, but a surge of foreign tourist numbers. Immediately after taking office, Abe's cabinet introduced visa deregulation for Asian countries. Along with that, Abenomics' first arrow, a flexible fiscal policy, successfully weakened the yen by introducing low interest rates. A weakened yen makes traveling to Japan more affordable, and along with the visa deregulation, enticed foreign visitors, especially from neighboring China, South Korea, and other Asian countries, to come to Japan. While these policies caused a short-term increase in tourism numbers, a sustainable long-term increase in foreign visitors can only be achieved by structural policies. Japan ranks among the worst countries in Asia when it comes to English language abilities, and the command of Chinese, Korean, and other languages is marginal at best. Providing essential services like public transport, restaurants, cultural sites, museums, etc. in multiple languages is paramount to reduce language barrier concerns for tourists. Abe's government went the extra mile and formed destination management organizations in tourism hotspots. These DMOs offer a wide range of services for both public and private companies to make their services and products more accessible to tourists. DMOs assist not only in translation and other language-related problems, but also in addressing cultural differences and strategic efforts to cater to foreign tourists on a local level. Tourism is also essential for another goal of Abenomics: regional revitalization. Today's rural Japan is unable to keep up with metropolitan areas, and young people continue to leave for the big cities. To revitalize these regions, tourism can be effective, as it not only injects money into the local economy, but also creates employment in the tourism sector, which is often favored by younger people. In 2017, the Abe cabinet published a report on the future of Japan's tourism. By this point, the number of foreign visitors has tripled from 10 million in 2013 to 30 million in 2017. The report set ambitious goals: 40 million foreign visitors in 2020 and 60 million in 2030. The crown jewel of Abenomics' tourism policy was the Tokyo Olympics 2020, a pet project of Shinzo Abe, which was supposed to cement Japan as a tourist-friendly country with attractions both urban and rural. Japan was to be marketed to the world as a country with both beaches and mountains, rich cultural and historic sites, and vibrant metropolitan centers in the minds of the international visitors and audiences. By March of 2020, it was unfortunately clear that COVID-19 would lead to the Tokyo Olympics to be postponed to at least 2021. The Japanese people were afraid of the virus and pressured the government to cancel the Olympics and shut off the country. Needless to say, the Abe government complied, fearing the already low approval rating for pandemic mismanagement to be exacerbated by pushing for tourism. This was in 2020. Now, in 2022, We look back at 2 years of living in a pandemic, and most countries have started to return back to normality, except Japan. The question that poses itself now is, why does the Japanese government so willingly give up the fruit of their labor of the last decade? Travel restrictions were common in 2020 and international travel plummeted regardless of restrictions during the early months of COVID. In 2021 and especially 2022, however, many countries try to leave the pandemic behind. Why does only Japan continue to close itself off, especially when the idea of reopening carries enticing macroeconomic merits? The answer lies in the public perception of COVID-19. For much of the pandemic years, the case numbers in Japan per capita were incredibly low, especially considering how densely populated much of the country is. Until January 2022, the number of cases per week never reached more than 130 per 100,000 people. In the beginning of 2022, case numbers exploded, reaching up to 520 cases per 100,000 people a week. Putting these numbers into context shows how minuscule they are. The total cases as of July 2022 per 100,000 people are 8,400 in Japan, 27,000 in the US, 36,000 in South Korea, and 34,000 in the UK. Even with the sudden increase in case numbers in 2022, compared to other countries, Japan is in a rather good spot. These low numbers go hand in hand with the comparatively light domestic COVID restrictions. Unlike many other countries, Japan has not closed restaurants, but opted for less restrictive measures like prohibition of alcohol after 8 p.m. And online school was only in some cases applied at university level, with other schools remaining unchanged. The decision to turn to home office was left to the companies themselves, most of which, being technologically outdated and conservative in their mindset, were unable or unwilling to provide the opportunity of home office. That being said, as much of the domestic restrictions are light, the international restrictions are strict. The public perception of foreigners entering the country infected with COVID and causing super spreader events is rooted into the Japanese conscience. Even if complete travel bans are criticized by epidemiologists and other experts as ineffective, especially when case numbers are growing anyway, the public perception remains cautious. A weighing of economic effects against the effectiveness of the measures is not commenced, and cutting off tourism completely is not perceived as an overblown measure for most of the Japanese public. In return, the public forces the government's hand when it comes to COVID management. Shinzo Abe's resignation in August 2020 was officially because of health issues. In reality, his approval rating at the time was abysmal. The public found his pandemic management skills to be subpar, as his cabinet did not pass any lockdown measures and only provided 2 masks per person, once. Abe's successor, Yoshihide Suga, insisted on not cancelling the Olympics and held them under scrutiny in 2021. Even though athletes and staff entering Japan was harshly limited and spectators were not allowed at all, the public still perceived the Olympics as high risk. Ultimately, Suga was unable to continue his tenure as prime minister also because of low approval ratings caused by the pandemic. The current Prime Minister Fumio Kishida knows full well that if he revises the travel restrictions, his approval ratings could tank and he might be forced out of office, which is likely the reason he tries to ease into opening the country slowly by allowing guided tours. Many economists push Japan to reopen out of fear that Abenomics' efforts for tourism might be irreparably damaged. After all, the structural policies put in place have basically been unused for more than 2 years by this point. English-speaking personnel in the tourism sector have long changed jobs, and it will be hard to reroute these people back into tourism. The customer side is severely affected as well. Many people currently interested in traveling to Japan are disillusioned by the government's harsh restrictions and might instead lose interest and opt to spend their money elsewhere. Even if the government opens the country, when that happens is anyone's best guess, restrictions like mandatory testing and even quarantine will probably continue for some time, making traveling to Japan less attractive. Even if Japan opens the country right now and political ramifications do not appear, the tourism sector will likely take years to return to pre-COVID levels. Finally, and maybe even more important than the economic opportunity costs, the loss of geopolitical soft power caused by the travel restrictions are worrying diplomats. One senior diplomat in the foreign ministry called this shutdown, quote, the largest single loss of soft power, unquote, that he has ever witnessed. Geopolitical soft power is the means to influence diplomacy by, generally speaking, increasing other countries' public image of your own country. Since Japan is severely restricted by its constitution to maintain and deploy armed forces, i.e. hard power, soft power is indispensable for its government to make diplomacy. For example, South Korea and Japan have multiple conflicts over the issue of comfort women during World War II. The South Korean government went so far to suggest a boycott of Japanese goods and services to pressure the Japanese government. However, Japanese soft power had gripped many Koreans who watched anime, traveled to Japan, watched Japanese dramas, listened to the music of Japanese idols, etc., and did not necessarily care for a boycott in return aiding the Japanese government. All of these activities stem from Japanese soft power, and by essentially giving up tourism, Japan gives up one of its greatest sources of soft power. While it is neither measurable nor immediate to take effect, the loss of soft power because of the travel restrictions is significant, according to diplomats of various countries. All of that being said, there's no right way to advance when it comes to travel policy. It's a lose-lose situation because any politician who reopens the country may help the economy, but will inevitably end his political career. Politicians who appease the public and postpone reopening may stay in office for longer, but ultimately exacerbate the downfall of the Japanese tourism industry. It remains to be seen how COVID case numbers and especially the public perception of them in Japan will develop in the fall of 2022. But one thing is for sure, the damage to the tourism industry has already been severe, and it is going to take serious efforts and investments by governments of all levels to return to the stellar growth rates of pre-COVID. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, if you want to see more about Japanese politics and history, please subscribe. Have a nice day!